Well, as the person who's responsible for getting the light started on time, I accept another great success today. We're on time. It is time for us to call to order the MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Board meeting of September the 22nd, 2011. You have before you and in your packet the minutes of the August 25th meeting of our advisory board. You've had a chance to review them. Are there additions or corrections?
I've just got a minor one, Mr. Chairman. I know that we've realigned the wards lately, but I didn't realize I was Ward 3 councilman.
Ooh.
I think we can fix that.
On the cover page of the minutes, it has Ward 3 as my ward.
We'll get that corrected, Councilman.
We will, are there any other additions or corrections? Then would you like to approve these minutes as amended? They've been moved that they be approved. Is there a second? It's been seconded, moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved as amended. Item 3 is the MAPS 3 revenue and expenditure report. And Eric, you're going to cover that for us?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. We do have the report ending June 30 for your consideration today. A couple of items of interest. You'll see that our total revenues through that period now exceed $100 million. They're $104,106,000. We actually have also the expenditures to date that are categorized again by project. And again, as we progress with the projects, with A&E contracts, with land purchases, we're going to continue to keep these updated on a monthly basis. And with that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
Michael Dover, Michael Adams, would you ask the questions that we need to have asked for us?
Well, I don't have any questions on the report, but have we slipped a month behind? It seemed like we skipped a month and at some point, and I thought maybe we'd get 1 month to get caught back up.
So each year, our fiscal year ends on June 30, and so there is a delay that occurs at the end of our fiscal year. And so what you're having is that closure report today, and then we will be getting back on a normal schedule starting next month.
So we should have 2 next month to get back on track?
It's possible. It just has to do with the data, but we have seen that in the past that we could have 2, but we'll have whatever data is available. We'll have that on for October.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions about the revenue and expenditure report? Eric, in an overall sense, do the numbers indicate that we're running on as envisioned, or ahead of projections, or behind?
I'd say we're right on our target projections today. Things look good. I would say we're just slightly above our target projections, but we're definitely moving forward. We have the funds as expected.
Great. All right, then let's move to item 4 on the agenda, the resolution approving the MAPS 3 Senior Health and Wellness Center scope of work and development final report. Eric's going to lay the predicate for us, and then Michael Dover would invite your comments from the subcommittee. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually are going to request that this item be stricken from the agenda today. This was an item that was considered by the subcommittee, and I can allow Mike to probably offer some more information, but it just was not complete. We were anticipating having it ready. There are some additional comments that are being prepared by AIP, the consultant that we hired, and so they're bringing those additional comments to the subcommittee next month, and so this would be an item that we'd like to reconsider in October.
Any additional comments, Mike Dover? Okay, thank you. All right, item 5. Eric, you want to brief us on that?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did have another item at the Wellness Center for your consideration today, and this is the request for proposals for the MAPS 3 Senior Health and Wellness Center Partnership Project. We've discussed this over a series of months, and we've been working on a draft request for proposals for some time. There's been a lot of comments from staff. We're actually receiving to date still some additional comments from our municipal counselor's office. So what you have before you today is that draft proposal. We believe it's more or less 99% complete. There are a few legal questions that are yet to be answered. Those are specifically in the areas of land, how we would handle partnerships on land that is, say, to be donated, or land that would be built on that would need to be leased by the city. So there's still a few questions in that regard, but I'm not anticipating other significant changes. We did have a few comments from the subcommittee yesterday that we'll also be incorporating. There was some additional language that was proposed on how the scoring would be addressed. We have some of the percentages that have been or will be modified at the request of the subcommittee. But with that, I think you'll see that most of those are minor in nature. And so we're asking today for your consideration to forward this draft report with, subject to change, with some minor changes by staff to address the legal questions that are still outstanding, and have it prepared for City Council in the next month.
Mike Dover, any comments?
I think the only other comment, Tom, is I think we also agree that we would put in the RFP that there will be, and I'm forgetting the correct term, but I believe it's a pre-bidders conference that would allow all the potential bidders to come together for a Q&A kind of session. I think that's the only other thing that's not in.
And staff has received that as well, and I failed to mention that, but we will be including that as a part of the notice of request of proposals. It's about page 3 in the document.
Eric, I did notice on page 7 that one of the first item up there is asking them to describe their timeline for the design and construction of the facility. Are these partners going to be designing and constructing the facility, or isn't that the city's responsibility?
So the actual design will be the city's responsibility, but I think one of the goals that we have is to have them on board with us at the same time in being a part of that timeline. I think there's some other proposals, not knowing what kind of responses we're going to receive. Some of the partners have suggested that they have some existing facilities that could be used as part of wellness centers. And I think we just want to make sure that we're on the same page, whether they've got a similar construction project that we're trying to align schedules, or whether this is a brand new center on a brand new site. We're trying to make sure that we have all the angles covered.
Okay.
Other questions for Eric or Mike or Wayne on this item? Then you're asking that we act on this resolution today. Is that right, Eric?
We are.
The resolution is included in your packet and has been endorsed by legal counsel. What action would you take?
I would move that we, the resolution to extend the RFP and go through that process.
Is there a second?
Second.
Wayne seconds it. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's adopted. Item 6 on our agenda is the discussion action on MAPS 3. Wanted to mention just a couple of things to you. I think if we think about the action of the past couple of months, we'll see that we're making a lot of progress here. Some of the most difficult decisions of the whole process have been brought forward, and I guess I like to think about our job as putting the council in a position to make the best decision they can. And when I think about locating the convention center, getting the implementation plan done, and most recently getting a budget approved, we're making progress. Having said that, you will know that the last time we met, we sent a budget proposal forward, and that it was considered, I think, on August the 30th by the council, and they have made a decision, and now it's time, I think, for us to act within the scope of what the directions they've given us. I did ask Eric if he would be prepared this morning to address the process that we went through, because, as you already know, the council did not accept the recommendation that our advisory board made, and they considered 3 options. And I've asked Eric if he would give us his comments about the process that was followed, kind of talk to us also about next steps and get ourselves prepared to move on. And then he's also agreed that he will answer any lingering questions that any of us have, preparing the way for us to take our next steps. And with that, Eric, would you do that for us?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As most of you know, earlier this month, on September 4th, the City Council did adopt the implementation plan for MAPS 3, version B. And it was actually adopted with an amended with an amended comment, and I just probably, to make that simpler, I'll just read it as it was amended. It was a resolution that said the MAPS 3 Citizen Advisory Board and the Park Subcommittee are hereby requested to develop also an innovative plan to minimize the adverse impact of the OG&E substation and the overhead power lines on the development and use of the MAPS downtown park, such plan to be implemented from the $30 million infrastructure budget. So this was moved and seconded as a part of version B being adopted by the City Council. But prior to that, as most of you know, we've been working for a series of months on the implementation plan. This is something that started before the beginning of the year. We were starting to structure the outline of the plan. As you look at projects and you talk about budgets and you talk about scopes of work and you talk about schedule, you'll know that we've had several questions come before us all the way through the spring and into the summer. Lots of presentations, even during the workshop that we had in April as we were starting to build the actual contents of the plan. The timeline, of course, was adopted this summer in July. That helped us secure the budgets, and so we actually had some early work, and that had significant conversations about some of the order of the projects, lots of opinions and lots of differences in how that should be laid out, but we did finally reach a consensus on that document. We moved forward. It allowed ADG then to finish up the final document that we brought back to this advisory board last month. And there were two options that were presented to you, both of those coming as more or less version A and version B. Right before the City Council meeting, there was actually a third version, a version C, that was requested by the Council that it be added onto the agenda. And so staff did prepare that. One of the comments that I've received was why that wasn't provided to this advisory board before that meeting, and simply that decision had not been made at that time. So when we met a month ago, the council packet was published on that Friday afternoon, and as each of you know, our staff sent out an email to each of you letting you know what the council's items were for that upcoming Tuesday. So we wanted to do our best to make sure that you had all the information in front of you. But that item went to council on September the 4th, and it came with much discussion. There were a lot of questions from various council members, but again, what was ultimately adopted was that version B with the additional instructions that I read just prior. So where staff is today is we're pleased to at least have direction from our council to move forward. The budget, the scope, and the schedule for each of the projects has generally been outlined. I've got some additional updates, but I will hold those until we answer any questions that you have on this item. But there's a lot of work that's underway, and there's a lot more that's now ready to come now that we have some of those decisions made. But with that, I'd be happy to address any items.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions anyone has for Eric?
I guess I would be curious a little bit about the process from the standpoint of, we as an advisory board made a recommendation, and it seemed like, I guess I would have thought that that recommendation would have been the one presented and acted on, and if they rejected it, it would come back to us. But it was almost like there was three different options, like we really hadn't made a decision, here's three different options, choose, threw the ball into the council's court, and I'm not sure, Tom was there, he wasn't asked to present the recommendation from the advisory board, and I guess I just don't really understand the process. It seemed like we went through quite a process to come to a recommendation, but yet when it goes to council, it was like thrown out, here's three different things, choose one.
If you look at the memo that we provided to you, we very much made it clear that the recommended option was option A, recommended by this advisory board, and that was included in the background information that the council received. So they were very aware of what the recommendation was of this body. We simply included some additional, the option that you also saw, which was option B, but then the third option was requested by council, and staff simply responded to that request. So that was one that they asked that we put together for their consideration. Council simply has the option to bring things onto their own agenda. It's not that they believe that your recommendation's not worthy. That was discussed at length, and it has been for quite some time. The revised resolution that Councilman White brought before the meeting that was actually acted upon, staff didn't have that until the meeting actually started. So there are things that actually can come up on the council floor, and they can amend just as you can items for either approval or recommendation, and that's simply what happened that day.
Well, I certainly understand that, and we did, say in our meetings that we didn't have a lot of guidance from the council as to what the position was on the substation, so, we made a recommendation and knew, it might very well be changed, but I just felt, that it was, the way it was presented, it was, I almost felt like, we hadn't decided anything, so here's your choice. Here's choices to choose from, and I don't think that was the case. I think we did make a recommendation, and it would seem like the first process, and maybe I don't understand the parliamentary procedures, but the first process would have been accept or reject that one, and then move on to the other options.
Sue?
I just want to make a couple comments. First of all, I think this entire board understands that the city council has the right and the ability to make decisions, and we respect that, and I think as a board, we're happy to have it. So now we know to go forward. I think, again, we just need to make it maybe a matter of record that we've got a lot of people on a lot of committees working hard, and then coming back together as an advisory board, sending forth some really hard thought, difficult decisions. And so we make those not lightly. And I just want that to be on record.
Thank you.
If I might comment additionally, I mean, recall that the implementation plan has 8 projects, and it has a contingency included in it, it has a timeline included in it, and it has scopes of work. The difference in the options was actually very small. I mean, the difference was changes in the convention center budget and changes in basically the contingency or what was created as the infrastructure budget. So the recommendations that we went through the other committees, the ones that were discussed at length, all those were accepted as they were. So this was very much a minor change, at least from my perspective, of looking at the document as a whole. 90%, 95% of it was accepted as recommended from this board. It was just that one issue that was discussed at length. And so I hope we can put it in that kind of a light that they did receive most of the recommendations, if not almost all.
I'd like to add Michael Adams and I were there, but we were also, our board was also represented by Councilman Mars, and he did present our case. And so I wouldn't want you to leave thinking that our case was not presented just because I wasn't called on to say anything, nor was Michael Adams. But at least I felt good about the fact that Councilman Mars was a representative of our group in that council meeting, and definitely I thought did a good job of making our case, even though they did not accept our recommendation. But I wouldn't want to get past this without you appreciating that. Anyone else a question?
Well, I would just want, I am not objecting in any way in the decision the council made, and certainly their right to make it, so that wasn't the point. My point was more kind of on the process, and I know this body had been criticized a few months ago when they made changes at the last minute and didn't run it back down through the subcommittees. And so this seemed like another incident of the same sort of thing where changes were made and wasn't run back down through the process. And that was basically my comment. It was on the process and not on the decision.
Councilman Martin.
Well, just a quick comment, because I don't want anybody on this board to think that council doesn't appreciate the work and doesn't look very closely at your recommendations, and it weighs very heavily on their decision, I'm sure. The $30 million in the substation was going to be a discussion point long before this board ever got started. We knew that. And unfortunately, it got swept up in a number of things going on and a number of things being discussed. And at the Convention Center Subcommittee, that's why I made the comment that I didn't want that committee to get very emotional about it or spend a lot of time about it, because you're going to have to send it on up. It was going to be a big discussion point on council. I knew it was going to be, and it's a policy decision that needed to be made, and that's the unfortunate part of all of it. Hopefully, I think you'll find as we move forward now that one's out of the way, so to speak, that we can get to the business at hand, and council will look very favorably upon this committee's work and all the subcommittees' work. I'm not saying we won't have our moments from here on out, but don't think that that's indicative of everything that this board is going to send up, that is going to go on that way. And it's not unusual when, on whatever the subject or whatever the council agenda item might be, it's not unusual for when council hears that that's coming forward to ask the city manager to put another option on, so that there could be more than one option to discuss. So that procedure is not unusual, and has happened on a number of things. So, and even though there may not be options, doesn't mean it won't get amended right at the council meeting too. So don't think that was pointed strictly at this board's work. So I'm confident that we can continue to move on with all of the projects.
Anyone else? Well, I'll conclude then with this. I guess my only question is the going forward. That is to say, I think there would have been a value in if we had known about the option for us to discuss it. It might have been one, we might have recommended it if we'd have been asked, but we weren't. And so I guess what I'd like to know, what I'd like to get a sense of, and I guess maybe Councilman Mars has done that, but we go through the process. We take these things to the subcommittees, they bring them here, we recommend them, and then do we expect in the future, rather than an amendment, as Councilman White did, which I understood perfectly. I have no problem with the council amending, and I have no problem with the council deciding. I think that's their job, and that's all right with me. But as we work for months and months and then bring options in, so any council member can call at the 11th hour and say, well, you guys have decided on a convention center site, but I like one Northwest 23rd, put that in as an option. And that's what you'd do. Is that what you're telling us?
If I was directed from council, yes, that's exactly what I would do for their agenda. I mean, it's their agenda, and
Sure.
and staff would respond.
And I think that makes clear to us, what our efforts ought to be and what we ought to be. We have to do our job in that sense, that we may or may not have all of the information. And so we just, doing that and understanding that, then we move forward. So what are the next steps for us?
One of the things that I want to add is just as soon as staff became aware of the additional information that was going to be posted on the agenda, and something that I would hope to continue to do in the future for you is to keep you informed. And so, if those items are added to that agenda and it comes after some recommendations that were made by the board, we're going to send those out via email, just as we have in the past, to make sure that you're aware of that just as soon as those decisions are being made. And so I think we're going to continue that process and just make sure you have those items. But to answer on Tom's question of going forward, we do have several projects that are moving quite quickly ahead, and I know that we did not have a lot of action items on the agenda today. But let me run through the list of the projects as a part of just the general MAPS 3 program update to kind of give you a status on each. We're obviously continuing to quickly acquire land for the downtown park. You actually have several informational items in your packet today that show additional projects, or I should say additional parcels that are being acquired. This is on your screen. There's also a handout in your packet, but you'll see the number of blue spaces increasing each and every month. And so we do have 3 new ones that have been added to that list. There are a number of parcels that we've not been able to successfully negotiate contracts on. Those are in a crosshatched area, but those are the ones that have been referred for condemnation. But generally, you can see the number of tan areas is greatly reduced, and those are the ones that are predominantly owned by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. So we'll be working closely with them on those parcels, but all of the privately owned parcels have been contacted, and we're working actively on those. On the Oklahoma River, I think most of you are aware, we have 2 very active projects on the Oklahoma River. I'll leave some room for some subcommittee updates because we did have a river meeting this week, but I should say we have a river update. But the windscreen project is moving ahead. It's about 50% complete on that design review. On the lighting improvements, the final plans and specifications are greater than 80% complete, and so you could expect in the next 60 days or so completed plans that will be coming before this advisory board for recommendation. It's a project that we're hoping to start construction on later this year and have it ready for late spring, early summer to actually have those permanent night racing lights installed and for use. At the fairgrounds, we're actually getting ready to issue, as a result of the implementation plan, the advertisement for the Phase 1 site work for the fairgrounds improvements. And so that, you'll notice on your implementation plan timeline, is on track and on schedule. Sidewalks and trails, we did go ahead, and those were early in the program as well, issued advertisements for those. We have received responses from interested engineers, and we are in a shortlist process and preparing for interviews, and so those can be expected over the next few weeks. Health and wellness centers, we did have 2 items for your consideration today. One was one we could act on, and one will be back to you next month. But the wellness centers are moving ahead. We are preparing to issue advertisements for architects. We have a scope of work that we should have to give you the best idea of what that center will look like in a month, and we also have the partner RFP ready to go. So those are all coming together nicely. And then lastly, something that you can expect at each of the subcommittees in the next month, ADG is progressing as well. And so there is a document that is for each of the projects called the project requirements. And this more or less assembles all of the historical information on a project. It puts together the budget, puts a little more detail to the schedule and to the scope of work that's going to be presented to each of the subcommittees for additional review. But this is a document that ultimately goes to an architect so that they know what the project is. And when we look at the implementation plan, it's just 1 page. This is going to be a more detailed document that very much describes the project in a detail that's useful for consultants, lets them help prepare fee proposals for us to consider for contracts, and so you can expect to see those in the next month at each of your subcommittees. But with that, the program is moving very nicely forward. I know that the implementation plan helped us get to where we are today, and of course we're using that as a planning tool for the future, so you can see more and more advertisements and work coming before the advisory.
All right. Any other items, Eric?
You know, on the agenda today, we did not leave room for subcommittee updates, and I don't know if, Mr. Chairman, you want to take this time and allow them to update the subcommittees as a part of this agenda item, or maybe on comments from the board.
Sure.
I think we can do either place.
We'd be delighted to hear from any subcommittees that wanted to report under Agenda Item 8, comments by board. Anyone want to give us a report on the subcommittees? Kim?
I guess I could start with the Park Subcommittee. We met yesterday afternoon and had quite a full agenda. We had updated presentations from the Project 180 and also on the from Rick Kane reviewing the transit system and where that stood. And then we moved quickly into a discussion regarding exactly what we're talking about with the last council meeting and the motion that was made and approved through that. And I will say there was some discomfort in that meeting. It became very impassioned. I would really have liked to have seen the charge from the council appear in writing at our meeting yesterday so that the entire Parks subcommittee was all on the same page and understanding exactly what happened and transpired, although it's all on video in SIRE Access on Records that we can get to 24/7. But I think it would have made clear the objective that has now been put before the Parks Committee and how to move forward. Because of that, our meeting ran extremely long. We had a tour of the Myriad Gardens following that, and I really want to thank all the city employees that stayed extra hours last night to make sure that that tour could happen, because it was very valuable to the entire process of planning the park. The more that those subcommittee members are able to see what's happening around us, better determines how we make a great park. So again, just going back to that informational item so that we as a subcommittee had clear direction. I think for our next meeting we've asked for that information, and Councilman Mars and Councilman Shadid were at that meeting and helped view perspective and viewpoint from the council meeting so that we could begin to move forward.
Well, I'll give a brief report for the River Subcommittee. There was, the chairman of the subcommittee, D, was not able to be there, and there was not a quorum, but they received an interesting report. No action was taken, but they met on Tuesday, I believe, and there was an interesting report from Mike Knopp on, he and a couple of subcommittee members had taken a trip overseas to look at whitewater venues in Germany and a couple of places in the United States, and came back with kind of what's out there and what others are doing. And they're moving forward. Councilman Mars was there as well. The next step for them is to continue to gather information about the location, the siting of the whitewater venue. But they're, I think it would be fair to say that they're moving forward expeditiously. And then they had a report as well from Rand Elliott about the windscreen, which was fascinating, about what the windscreen that will be put up on the south side of the river. And so those were, even though the committee didn't take any formal action to bring to us, they're certainly moving along with that. Gary or Eric, would you want to add anything to that?
I don't think I have anything to add, but just to clarify, the Germany trip that Mike took did not have anything to do with MAPS 3. I mean, that was something that he did as a part of his affiliation with the Boathouse. So when we're talking about tours and things, I don't want to get everybody ramped up that thinks that we've got international tours, scheduled. But obviously it was valuable information that he was able to bring back and share with that subcommittee. And there is quite a bit of video that's on YouTube that I know that the Boathouse Foundation is uploading, and we can also make that available to other members if you have interest in that project.
Well, it's pretty exciting what the progress we see them making down there. You have anything to add to that, Gary? All right, if there are no other subcommittee reports, then
I'll just ask something real quick. Speaking of tours in Germany, one of our transit subcommittee members just got back from Germany, or was it Austria? Okay. So, and to look at some of their technology they have for transit, but I also kind of want to make just a matter of record that a lot of our committee members are very excited to start looking at technologies and what's out there. But the matter of record that I wanted to state was that, we have a very thorough vetting process that council staff will guide us through for reviewing all the different suppliers and vendors out there, and that we expect that to be, happening in due process. But also, I don't know if this is the best venue, but it's good enough. For sidewalks, I wanted to kind of throw that out there, that we have around the zoo, kind of the entertainment district area, a good opportunity for sidewalks in that area. So I wanted to state my preference. I heard that if you ever come across, I guess, desire paths, is that the correct term, then let me know. So I noticed a lot of families kind of walking along the street, going from the parking lot to the zoo or the science museum. So that's all I had.
Certainly. Eric, anything else from staff?
We don't have anything further, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then we'd want to invite any citizens that are with us today for any comments. Any citizens want to be heard today? If not, Rusty.
I guess I had here, if we're on comments by the board, I had an overall general comment. And before I do that, I guess, did I miss, I thought the agenda had update of the MAPS program by Jim Couch. Not happening?
We actually had a revised agenda that went out, I think, that corrected that error.
Oh, got it. I saw a revised agenda, and I couldn't tell what was different. Okay. I missed that. Okay. I guess then just comments by the board. I wanted to make comments generally to the rest of my board members, and I guess the public, and also pass on to the council. Overall, a fear I have of where we've, one of the biggest things we have with all of our MAPS 3, and it eventually comes down to the convention center. I understand how the process went, and that they have gone against our advice on a $30 million reduction in the convention center budget. I now believe I understand why, but I believe our nearly unanimous decision that was overruled, I guess. It went another way with a very close vote. Now what I fear has been put in motion is now a convention center with a budget reduced after the location was decided. And it was a little bit of chicken and the egg, but it would have been better. We had been asking for guidance from the council before on this issue. And location was chosen for the convention center when the budget was $280 million. We were presented with, hopefully it can go underground because it's going to be in between our two parks, the Myriad Gardens and our new park. And we approved that location with the hope that it could go underground. Well, now with a reduced budget, I now wonder, are we going to be able to put it underground? are we going to end up with an above-ground, fully above-ground convention center separating the parks? And is that knowledge, unfortunately, is a little late now that we've chosen a location. I hope that this, that it's not a problem, but I fear we will have a budget that allows it, that does not allow it to be underground, that will maybe not be perceived as the best, and that also budget-wise, whether we can have it built as big as we need it, we want it built, and whether we will have a significant enough improvement from what we have to be worth it. It was, it's by far the largest project the city's ever done on one of the MAPS projects, one single project, $250 million now. And the $30 million change that was not made until after the location was selected, I will say it's very significant. You were mentioning a minor change, Eric. I don't think you meant $30 million as minor. That $30 million change that we were not given guidance on until after the convention location was selected, it's very large. I think I remember, it's about what we spent on the ballpark. It's a lot more than we spent on the construction of the library. It's more than we spent on the canal, I believe. It was a very significant change to what had previously been stated, and I guess I don't like the timing at which we finally know that the budget has been reduced. I don't suggest we today reconsider the location of the convention center, but I fear that that's going to come up later when we're looking at what we're building and trying to go underground and whether we can afford it. So I just want us to all think about that. I want the council to think about that. I don't have a specific suggestion of what we do about it now. I just feel like, I feel like a bit of a predicament now.
Rusty, I would just add that and Michael and Gary may want to correct me on this, but when Mike Nice made the presentation, there was information given to the council about the impact relating to size, and if that's of interest to you, Mike's here and can tell you, but my recollection is, without having it memorized, that it would reduce the size of the convention center by roughly 100,000 square feet. There was not and that was discussed. I mean, the council was made aware of that in the presentation that Mike made. I don't believe there was discussion about the underground option, but I could stand corrected about that. So I wouldn't want you to think that they didn't. I mean, that information was presented to them, I would say. Mike Evans.
I guess on Rusty's point too, I also have the same concern. I guess the site selection in my mind was based on the convention center subcommittee was considering a $280,000 budget. Knew they were saving $30 million by relocating from here, and used, I think, $17 million land acquisition costs is in the site selected. And I think that, that was, we're saving $30 million here so we can afford to buy this land over here where we finally chose it. And now with that $30 million out, I think it did have some impact, or would have had some impact on the site selection. Not that it would have changed it, but I think it was certainly a factor considered in the scoring.
Well, I'll just say that we'll be, the Convention Center Committee did not meet this week, but I have every anticipation that we'll be meeting next month, and that all of these items will be fully vetted then. Mike Gilbert.
Tom, I would tell you, I have a little different memory. At the Park Subcommittee meeting, not the last one, not yesterday, but last month, and I don't remember, Rusty, the gentleman's name from, I believe, the Populous, is that the consulting group that made that presentation?
It was actually Ryan Eshelman with GSB.
Okay.
Who was part of the Populous team.
I asked specifically a question. If the number he was using was $250 million, I asked at that Park Subcommittee meeting, and he said it was. I specifically asked that question. And the other thought that I had is, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we not put those dollars in a contingency fund? And isn't by definition the contingency fund subject to what those dollars may be used for some other projects? So I don't know that we closed the door that any additional dollars might go toward the convention center anyway.
If I might just add and clarify, so to follow up on Mike's comments, yes, the money wasn't put into any other project. It was put into an infrastructure category, as the contingency money is still there as well. So the $30 million was put into an infrastructure category, and there's still also $17 million in contingency. And if you'll look at your document, the implementation plan, it's at the discretion of the council to decide how those funds are to be used. I do know that the council is looking towards the advisory board and the subcommittees to make certain recommendations. And the very first one came with Councilman White's amended resolution asking that the Park Subcommittee look at options on how best to screen the substation adjacent to the park, and that be considered one of the first uses of that $30 million infrastructure fund. But again, I think there's going to be a number of decisions to come in the future, and if those monies are decided to be moved to certain projects, that's something that can go through the recommendation and the approval process. But I want to comment a little bit on the site selection too, and realize that what we charged Populous to do was to find the best site for a convention center. They were given some data about convention center. They were given the data about the size and potential sizes, and they also knew that we wanted to expand it in the future. And so they were looking at a lot of variables and went through a lengthy process to find absolutely the best site. But with that said, I believe that report does propose the best site, and we've gone through that process and made that determination. But when it comes back to actually building projects, which is actually something quite different, each of the projects, and not just the convention center, is going to go through a very detailed review and a very lengthy process in the design. And we will be faced with budgets that have to be met. And it won't just be the convention center, it will be the wellness centers, it will be the transit projects, it will be the work that we can do at the park. And we're going to have to make some decisions in the future as to how large or how little the scopes of work are that can fit within the numbers. And so we will absolutely utilize the dollars to their maximum potential. And the $250 million generally that's been prescribed for the convention center, for a building like that, size is one aspect, quality of finish is another. So if convention center, if we're looking for a certain size, we can easily achieve whatever size we want to, but the quality of finishes needs to then be discussed. If we want higher quality, it's possible that the size needs to be discussed. But we're going to be going through these types of discussions in the future, so I just want you to be prepared for that. But what we're working against today are just budgets, and so this is a starting point. We obviously have a lot of work ahead of us in the years to come, and again, I know that your input is going to be extremely valuable as we bring those recommendations forward through subcommittee, advisory board, and onto the city council.
Well, thank you. Kim?
I just have one comment in closing. That first, I'd like to say I truly respect this process. And like anything else in this world, it's not perfect. But the one thing that I think has struck me so much in this entire process is the comment that Councilman Mars said many months ago that MAPS 3 is a work in process. Nothing is cast in stone until it's built. And it's quite obvious that this whole process is fluid. As things move forward, we may have to redecide, and the council may have to redecide some of the things that were decided last week or last month, 6 months ago. And that may happen with all of our projects. And to me, that's quite a burden to have in this process, but it's also one of the most beautiful parts. Because as you become a little bit more educated and information is brought to you that you didn't have before, you can make the best decisions. So I think we all have to keep in mind that we're on a little bit of a roller coaster, but at the end, we're all going to get that great picture going. Yeehaw.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. Any other comments? Well, we have no comments from our citizens, and we've concluded our business. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.